Thanks everyone for joining me for this roundtable event. What a difference last year event to this year. And I just, you guys are the experts out in the field this year. What is the difference since last year, which was more focused on theory and the new law, compared to this year? And what are your biggest takeaways from the new ADU movement?
I think for me, the biggest kind of takeaway is how the need that we are seeing in our everyday lives for flexibility on our properties. And so we talk a lot about, ADUs as rental or for family, but the flexibility they give you in times like we're now in this pandemic and needing a place to maybe work from home, away from the kids, away from the dogs, all of those kinds of things. But also just giving you that flexibility to be able to bring a parent home if you need to, and then ultimately be able to rent it out as well. So I think that flexibility is really the kind of big takeaway that we're all seeing in our everyday life, and it's been kind of exaggerated this year, especially.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a client right before this, Meredith, who she originally had wanted to build a JADU on her property, and then with COVID and everything, felt like I just don't really want people in my house, and so I'm going to build a standalone unit instead. And she watched how her parents aged and saw the kind of the preparations and the planning that they made. And so she felt like, my short-term goal here is I want to have steady rental income, but then down the road, I have this opportunity for a caregiver. And then if my kids want to move into my main house and I'll live in this ADU, I'm going to design it for that way. So I totally echo what Jared is saying about, the fact that, who would have foreseen what 2020 was going to bring us? I mean, like literally craziness, right? And so the stability that ADUs can bring you, whether it's a recession or a pandemic or unexpectedly losing a job or having a family member that needs help, it just brings so much support.
What we see is that the COVID environment, of course, has really exacerbated the advantages of ADUs. Actually, being institutionalized has taken, rightfully or wrongfully, has really been disadvantaged in people's eyes, as they can't see each other. They can't visit each other, and this has given them an opportunity to still have some independence, and independent living support, and still visit, still be serviced by their families, still be close to their families, and still fulfill their families' need. The other thing I've seen that happened lately, which is really, really pleasing, is that this has switched from the granny flat stereotype to a much broader understanding of the tremendous advantages that ADU can be to a family going through various stages of life. They really realized that this was not an imposition. This was not cities being dictated to by the state. It actually is the case where property owners now have a right that they used to have to use their property in a manner which best needs the growing needs of their families. And I've watched that transition and really pleased with it, that as it moves out of its small stereotype that it once had.
How about those millennial investors though, Lenska? I know you are seeing this as a huge opportunity in the investment world as well. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
I wanted to be considerate, so in case I got some background noise, why I heard to you guys is a great feedback. So yes, actually, let's put it this way. We have been with the AU since 2017, right? So the investors caught on pretty quickly, where then the laws and the cities and contractors and mortgage companies were still behind. So I think we all sped up is the right word, to a point now where obviously in a market with, let's call it, no inventory, it is really beneficial for the homeowners to make that extra income, right? But for the millennials, if you are able to get into a home and you find one and have that extra income to offset whether the mortgage, it's great, but from a real estate point, from the real estate industry also finally caught up, and ADUs is the latest buzzword, any listing. But, you know, I have seen that picture where you have this big house with a little shed underneath and it says ADU potential. So not everything that a real estate broker advertises as an ADU potential is truly a potential. And that's why I appreciate you guys putting that forum together so people get educated, unless they have really an agent or somebody that can guide them.
I totally agree. But what's equally important that I've seen is a real opportunity for first-time investors and homeowners, as millennials have families and so on. Where else can you create a real estate investment with 3% down and basically turn a single-family unit into a triplex with incredible rental potential that builds a financial foundation for the rest of your life? To me, that more than anything, because it's hard to buy duplexes sometimes. It's hard to buy 4 units right off the bat. And it gives you a real opportunity. But so moving forward, what opportunities are you seeing right now in the market? You talked about the switch, Lenska, that what realtors are advertising. What is everybody seeing right now?
So what we see right now is actually builders that are first of all building new construction, considering or having floor plans that have an ADU already, usually more like a junior ADU, that's for sure. I have seen very few that actually do build with the detached ADU. So that one I've seen, and then I have seen practically an mail campaign to any homeowners that have a huge lot and still have that 925.5 square foot house. So I think this is the opportunity right there to build or to find these lots. And there are very hotspot areas in San Diego County who have that opportunity. So that's what I see. Plus, no doubt the garage conversion gets the Oscar of all ADUs.
You can kind of look at a lot of data to see like what are the growth trends and the potential here for ADUs. And I think, you know, we are in the early adoption phase of this. Like people are just getting their toes wet. Cities are just starting to get familiar with it. You know, we've had 7 big legislative bills passed in the last couple of years. I mean, if you think about how the speed of government moves, like that's incredible, right? And then I think the other thing that really can't be stressed enough here is that the interest rates are so rock bottom. I mean, there was never a cheaper time to borrow money for projects like this. And so I think all of that is just fueling the fire, and the fact that we have this huge affordability crisis. I mean, if people want to look at where's a good place to invest, you know, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find something better than you know, real estate and ADUs in California right now.
Yeah, investing in your own backyard. I mean, where else can you buy a house for $200,000, $250,000? It just doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
And you mentioned the housing crisis. So I don't want to say we have a demographics crisis, but if we're looking even further ahead, and I agree with you, Caitlin, that we're just, you know, start to begin to really benefit from the whole ADU laws is, you know, we have 10,000 people turn 65 every year. Even so, you know, 65 is the new 45, but in that regard, it is even better to have these ADUs where people actually can live independently, but maybe have a daughter or son that's nearby, you know, or within 100 feet or 200 feet. So I think I'm going to jump ahead to your next question. What excites me more, that I think for the first time we're actually thinking forward, even so we don't know we're thinking forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jared.
Oh, I was just going to kind of piggyback off of jumping into that next question about like what excites us. You know, I see a lot of the like legislative and regulatory things coming down the pike. And it's been a lot of fun to kind of see how some innovative programs are coming together. And I know this is, you know, focused statewide, but we've got some exciting things happening in San Diego. And I'm going to tell everybody more about that at the Casita Coalition webinar on the 29th. But yeah, there's so much that is like that we're trying to move forward. There's not as much push to keep bad policies in place anymore. So I see a lot of really good momentum on the regulatory side. And then just, you know, we finally have, we waited all year for it, but we finally have that guidance from HCD, and that really helps kind of solidify the state's opinion, because what we've always had is difficulty with individual jurisdictions having different interpretations. So it really helps to have that guidance finally out there.
I think for me, looking forward, what am I excited about? I'm excited that all these homeowners now have had all the regulatory barriers stripped away. They've had all the kind of BS stripped away, these extra fees, these extra timelines. Like, the process is becoming so much, you know, it's still not easy, but so much less kind of complicated than it had been before. And so I'm excited what people can actually do with their properties now, and how it can help them. And then, you know, kind of the you know, other exciting piece of that, the big umbrella, is that that's going to impact our housing crisis, which is only good for our economy, our schools, our businesses, you know, families. So anyway, I think there's just a lot of good things, in the works.
So yeah, I echo that. I'm really excited. We started our lives, our married lives, in an ADU. It helped us get started until we could move on, invest in our own property. We became great friends with the homeowners, and there's a lot of mutual support there. It was a great way to start life. Beyond that, there's a lot of diverse views among older Americans. But one thing that's just consistently in every survey we do in AARP, they want to live independently for as long as possible. And ADUs gives them an option to do that. What we are hoping, however, is that if you're going to develop your property for a lifetime, there's more emphasis on universal design and accessibility in ADUs. So frequently hospitals will tell you they discharge a person that's just so excited to come home, they can't get into their house 40% of the time, and they have to go back for a referral. And so we were hoping for some incentive. We're looking forward to some incentives, like you can have 2 ADUs if you build one that's accessible. Some incentives that give investors and property owners incentives to build more accessible ADUs, so the properties are good for a lifetime.
You know, that is one of the exciting things that I'm seeing this year and moving into next year. We've seen so much VC investment we talked about into prefabs and some other things, but I think overall we're seeing a tremendous movement to templatize to the extent that you can, like within each contractor, each designer, in the same way that you walk into a Lennar Homes or a KB Homes, you have 4 options and you have 4 looks, or however they call them. And including that age-in-place design is a great movement, and I think we're going to see that improve. And then also, you know, a decrease in costs as builders figure out what they're doing, and especially builders that are exclusively focused on ADUs. I'm seeing costs come down as they make their processes more efficient. They start to, you know, get wholesale on, you know, lumber and things like that. So I'm seeing costs come down. What I'm really excited about next year is the financing finally catching up.
An article just came out that San Diego has the least amount of buildable lots. So we practically, if you own a piece of property right now, all the power to you to make that worthwhile, either way financially. And Caitlin, you're right, that will probably push our home prices up. And I think for investors is to note, and you touched on that, Meredith, right now, the appraisal guidelines, let's say, are at a certain point where we don't give a lot of value to rental and nothing. So you actually have some built-in appreciation for later on once the law and more financing is actually catching up. As you know, in real estate, it's location terms, right? So buy up everything you can.
Well, that's why we're going to have Dundas to say from the Appraisal Institute on later, because that's important to understand those tough appraisal guidelines.
So we re-legalized ADUs in the main and made an administrative process and did a lot of work, but there's still death by 1,000 cuts in many communities. And gradually as attitudes change, I mean, this is the bright thing, those cuts are going away. And I guess I defer to others if that's true, but we sense that at least, and we're really, really excited that that's happening, because it was useless to block this anyway, because it's becoming very, very popular.
Yeah, it's really gotten a lot easier to document those cuts, and especially with some of the new processes with the state, it really makes it so that there's less cities that are putting up roadblocks because there's more at stake for them. So that's only going to continue to improve with time. But yeah, like I said, there's things that happen on individual projects, and they always will. They never said they were making it easy. They said they were making it simpler, and that's what they've done. So it's still a process that has a lot of moving pieces, but we've got the biggest hurdles out of the way. So,
Sharon, can we look forward to reduced turn times on permits this year?
I think we're going to see cities trying to fall in line more with the state's requirements there, because this is one of the things that we talk about with individual homeowners, but it bears mentioning here is that even though it says that they have 60 days to approve, a deemed approved by the state in reality doesn't get you much. It does a lot of good to put them on notice that they're on the clock, but what it doesn't do as much as we would like it to, because they still have to come out and inspect it. So if they're being told that their approval doesn't matter and that the deemed approved by the state is all that matters, they're not going to want to come out and inspect it. So it puts us in kind of an awkward spot when we bring up those discussions with cities. But I think with coming out of 2020 and normalizing some of these new processes, we're going to see those times come down. So again, individual cities may vary, but across the board, we're seeing that push still happening for cities to get faster.
Yeah, and I've seen that as a misconception with a number of our clients at Maxable too, where people think 60 days means you guaranteed to get that permit, but sometimes if you push back on the city, it can cause other complications. So we'd be happy to talk to people in our Expo table about it too, if people have regulatory questions or city permit questions. There's no one more knowledgeable about that than Jared. So.
Now, I'm between a rock and a hard beat, right? So people always ask me, why don't we have more inventory, right? So actually, one of the reasons we don't have a lot of inventory is that actually once the investors have a rental property and then they can increase their ROI, they're damned to put that house on the market. And since the ADUs are not quite falling under that rent control, law and stuff, and on the other hand, also homeowners now are able to offset the mortgage and they're building wealth and the low interest rates, so they're not going to put their houses on the market. So we have, a lot of restricted inventory. But
the one final takeaway from me is that get your financing in order early, because
Yes.
there's great rates out there. But really the first thing, when we talk about what you can actually do on your lot, it really comes down to how much money you have to put into it. And so having a clear view of that number allows someone like Maxable to really help you dial that down more. And when we don't have that clear view, we you know, we can talk in more generalities, but it's really hard to get you focused on a plan if we don't know what's available. So,
and the risk of running out of money on a project, I mean, I see people ham and egg it, and to the point that I really can't loan on the project, and it is a disaster. So that has been a huge lesson this year for sure.
I think that that we have learned exactly that. We try to make as many resources available as we can on our web pages. Many do to help. We have an experts association we partner with to get that advice. And I've heard one case that, in detail, of a wonderful lady in San Diego who gutted through the entire process by herself. But despite all the help available, it's really a good idea to touch base with an expert from time to time, because it's a tough process for a homeowner like me to become a developer. It's a long, long stretch. There are a lot of steps, and nobody should feel bad about asking an expert for some advice. Probably is good advice.
It's so true, Bob. I mean, if you think about just how fast, even just the regulations change, and, you know, San Diego just adopted a new ordinance in November. So what you knew in March is no longer true in November, you know, and things are moving so quickly that, you know, working with someone that this is their niche and this is what they do day in and day out, that is so important.
You know, one example we had of a client who's still trying to figure out how to do this. He had a buddy who was a commercial contractor come in and try to build the ADU. Well, he built it to commercial code, not residential code. They're having to rip out everything down, including the foundation. Horrible.
Ouch. That's a major mistake.
Yeah, but you know, coming back to the crisis, obviously what I'm excited about in general, that the home suddenly became the focus again for your life, right? So, and let's not underestimate the opportunity you have putting an ADU in it and actually using it as an office or as a Zoom room, right? So if you're working from home and you have that luxury, that could be also probably a pretty good write-off if you're working from home. Maybe you even ask your employer to chip in.
Yeah, those are great tax write-offs. And people underestimate that value. I mean, some of the CPAs we've talked to are saying you ought to be able to write off $16,000 to $20,000 on your taxes a year. And Bob, you know, I think it's interesting, a lot of retirees have been so focused on paying off their mortgage that, and I asked them, and they're reluctant to build an ADU because they just paid off their mortgage. And I said, well, was the whole goal of paying off your mortgage? It was really not to have a housing payment, right? But you've also pretty much eliminated your tax deduction. And you know, if you build an ADU and your renter is not only paying that mortgage, but they're giving you essentially $1,000 to $2,000 a month in passive income, you've not only achieved the goal of not having a housing payment, but you've added savings in your tax deductions and you're getting cash flow. So it's kind of the same thing.
You're right. In the forums that we've talked to our population, after you paid off your house, you're very hesitant to go back and take a home equity loan against that you need. It's just something that grinds on you. Mm-hmm. And so to hear you talk about new products where you can take a loan against prospective rent, where you can do use clever renovation upgrades, mm-hmm. It is going to be, because no matter how you put it, there's some sort of mental problem that all of us have with what we just paid off a car or a house, taking a loan against it, even though it may make sense.
I think that's a great lesson this year, is that building an ADU requires mental flexibility, because there's going to be obstacles, and it requires collaboration among people who've done this before, because there's going to be glitches. And I think that's the most important message I try to give to my clients. This is not a regular mortgage. This is not a regular purchase, home purchase. I mean, it's a different deal.
Yeah, but if you For example, just speaking of retirement, right? So if you have this big, and a lot of, talk is about the big Mac mansions, and you are putting a junior ADU in, and then you live in the main house, rent out the junior ADU, and then once you, whether travel or, you want to have a place stay to call home, so you move into the junior ADU and then rent out the big house, and boom, there is your whole vacation paid for. I'm looking forward to retire, but I think I won't be, because I am having too much fun helping people actually achieve also their financial freedom through investment, through home ownership, through, really owning real estate.
What Lenska said is true. In the surveys we've done, the intake, when we've had these great sessions like this, about 1/3 plan to live eventually in the ADU and rent the front unit, and 1/3 plan to live in the front unit and rent the ADU, and about another third are going to use the ADU to bring their family together in some help arrangement. And so I don't know how true that is. It's just off the cuff when we ask for surveys when they come in the door, but it really backs up what Lenska's saying. Okay,
Bob, are you telling me I should hang up my real estate license? There will no homes being sold?
Do it. Build your ADU and go into the rental business.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. We're going to get on with the awards, and you're going to see the best of the best designs, prefab modular manufactured homes, and actual stick-built homes. Here we go.